Today we're talking about your body after 40. It's not a lost cause, it's a system. And systems can be optimized. This is Against the Fade, a podcast for men who refuse to fade in midlife, and I'm Jonathan. Last week we talked about identity, what masculinity actually looks like when it grows up. The protector, the provider, the builder, the mentor. And this week we're going to get specific. Because here's the thing. You can have the right mindset, the right identity, all the purpose in the world, but if your body can't back it up, none of it holds. I've made a career out of helping people move better, get stronger, and stay healthy. I've worked with guys in their 20s, I've worked with guys in their 70s, and everything in between. And I can tell you what happens to the male body after 40 catches most men off guard. Not because the information isn't out there. It's because your body changes and nobody tells you that the approach has to change with it. What worked at 30 doesn't work at 45. And that's not a failure, that's just the biology of it. The guys who figure that out thrive. The guys who don't get frustrated, get hurt, or just quit. I've been looking forward to this episode because the first four we talked about the why men fade, why we go quiet, why we lose connection, and why we lose ourselves. This one's about the what. What's actually happening inside our body right now, and more importantly, what we can do about it starting tomorrow. This isn't a scare segment. I'm not here to read you a list of things that are falling apart. I'm here to arm you. Think of this as a strategy briefing. So let's get into it. So what's actually going on inside your body? Because most guys feel it before they understand it. You're tired and you don't know why, you're gaining weight and nothing changed, you tweaked your back doing something that never used to be a problem. You just feel different, and you chalk it up to getting old. But it's not just getting old. There's specific, measurable things happening. And when you understand them, you can fight back against every single one of them. So first, testosterone. Starting at about age 30, your testosterone drops about 1% per year. That's not my opinion, that's backed up by longitudinal endocrine research. And 1% doesn't sound like much, but by the time you're 45, you could be down 15% or more from your peak. And testosterone isn't just about sex drive. It affects your energy, your mood, your ability to build and maintain muscle, how well you recover, and how you carry your body fat. It touches a little bit of everything, and it's quietly declining in the background whether you're paying attention or not. Then there's muscle loss, and there's a term for this. It's called sarcopenia. So starting in your 30s, you lose somewhere between 3 and 5% of your muscle mass per decade. And after 50, it accelerates. Here's what that means in plain terms. Your body is dissolving the muscle you're not actively using. It's not dramatic. You don't wake up one day and notice it. It's gradual. A little less in the shoulders, a little less in the legs, and then one day you realize you're struggling with something that used to be easy. That's sarcopenia, and most men have never even heard of the word. And then there's the metabolism, and this is the one everybody feels. I eat the same way I always did, but I'm putting on weight. I hear that constantly, and it's not in your head. Your resting metabolic rate, the number of calories your body burns just existing, drops as you lose muscle. Muscle is metabolically expensive tissue. Your body burns energy just to maintain it. Less muscle, fewer calories burned at rest. Same diet, more fat storage. It's not a willpower problem, it's a math problem. And then there's the bone density. And this one surprises guys because we think of osteoporosis as something that happens to women. It happens to men too. After 50, bone density starts declining measurably. That means a fall on the ski slope or a bad landing in a pickup basketball game isn't just a bruise anymore, it's a real fracture risk. And a broken hip at 65 is not the same as a broken hip at 25. For older adults, that can be the beginning of a serious decline in independence and quality of life. Then lastly, we have recovery. Everything takes longer. That's not weakness, it's the physiology of it. Your connective tissue loses elasticity, your inflammatory response gets louder, your sleep quality changes, and sleep is when your body does most of its repair work. The guy who could train 5 days a week at 30 on 6 hours of sleep simply can't do that at 45. Not because he's less tough, but because the system has different requirements now. Now here's the part that matters. None of this is a death sentence. I need you to hear that. Every single thing I listed here is either reversible or manageable with the right intervention. Every single one of them. And that intervention is not a pill, it's not a supplement, it's not one of those hormone clinic billboards you see on the highway, it's the gym. So if that's what's happening, the testosterone, the muscle loss, the metabolism, the bone density, the recovery, the question is, what actually fights back? Not against one of those things, all of them. And the answer isn't one thing, it's three. 3 types of training that together cover every system in your body that's starting to work against you. And most guys are doing one of them, maybe doing it poorly, but almost nobody's doing all 3 of them. The first is strength training, resistance training, picking up heavy things on a regular basis. This directly addresses most of what I've just walked you through. It increases testosterone naturally, it reverses muscle loss, it boosts your resting metabolic rate so your body burns more calories even when you're doing nothing. It improves bone density, improves insulin sensitivity, and there's even strong evidence linking it to reduced risk of dying from all causes. Not just heart disease, not just diabetes, all causes. This isn't Jim Bro advice, this is the clinical evidence. Every major health organization on the planet now recommends resistance training as a frontline intervention for aging adults. The second is steady-state aerobic training. That's what some call Zone 2. This is moderate intensity cardio, not a sprint, not a slog, it's the pace where you can hold a conversation, but you wouldn't want to sing. And what it does at the cellular level is quite remarkable. It builds mitochondrial density, and those are the little engines inside your cells that produce the energy. As you age, those engines get weaker and less efficient. Zone 2 training builds more of them and makes the ones you have work a little bit better. It improves your body's ability to burn fat for fuel, it improves insulin sensitivity, and it lays the cardiovascular foundation that everything is built on. Think of it as maintenance for the engine. You can't outlift a weak aerobic system. The third is high-intensity cardio training. This training pushes your VO2 max, which is essentially the ceiling of how much oxygen your body can use. And this one might be the most important number most men have never heard of. A study out of the Cleveland Clinic looked at over 120,000 adults and found that low cardiovascular fitness carried a 5-fold increase in mortality risk compared to elite fitness. 5-fold. To put that into perspective, that's a greater risk than smoking, greater than coronary artery disease, and greater than diabetes. And the researchers found no upper limit to the benefit. The fitter you are, the longer you live, period. Your VO2 max declines about 10% per decade after your 30s. Training to maintain it or even improve it is one of the most powerful things you can do for longevity. So that's it. Strength, steady-state cardio, and high-intensity cardio. 3 pillars. That's the framework. And most men just simply aren't doing all 3. The CDC's own data shows that only about 1 in 4 men between 45 and 64 meet the minimum guidelines for muscle strengthening activity. 1 in 4. And the numbers for dedicated cardiovascular training aren't any better. The men who need this the most are doing it the least. And it's not because they don't know they should be training. Most guys know that. The problem is execution. Some think a few walks a week is covering them. It's not. Some are still training the way they did at 25, getting hurt, and deciding they're too old for this. And then some are paralyzed by the noise. Every influencer on the internet is selling some revolutionary new method, some secret protocol, some shortcut. And the result isn't motivation, it's confusion, decision paralysis, so they do nothing. Or they just bounce from one program to another and never build any consistency. Here's the truth. What actually works hasn't changed. Compound movements, progressive overload, consistent cardiovascular training. The basics aren't new. They aren't exciting, and they work every single time if you show up and you do the work. So that's not a fitness problem, that's a messaging problem. And that's part of why I'm sitting here today. Now last week we talked about the 4 pillars, the protector, the provider, the builder, the mentor. I said that's what mature masculinity looks like. Well, here's where it gets practical. You can't protect anyone if your body is failing you. You can't provide stability if you don't have the energy to show up, and you can't build anything if you're broken down, and you certainly can't mentor the next generation on the sidelines because your knees gave out. I'm not saying that training makes you a good man. I'm saying it keeps you in the fight long enough to become one. Strength isn't vanity, it's capacity. And right now, 3 out of 4 guys in our age bracket are leaving that capacity on the table. So now you know the 3 pillars: strength, steady-state cardio, and high-intensity cardio. Let's talk about what each one actually looks like in practice. Because knowing you need to train is one thing, but knowing how to train after 40 is something else entirely. So let's start with strength training. The foundation of your program should be compound movements. Exercises that work multiple joints and multiple muscle groups at the same time. There's 6 fundamental movement patterns your body is designed to do. Squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, lunging, and carrying. That's it. If your training covers those 6 patterns consistently, you're covering the vast majority of what your body needs from a strength perspective. And here's the bonus. When you do big compound movements through a full range of motion, you're training mobility at the same time. So you may not need a separate stretching routine if your training already has you squatting to depth and pressing overhead. The movement itself is the mobility work. And the principle that drives the progress on this is called progressive overload. That just means you have to gradually increase demand on your body over time. A little more weight, another rep, a harder variation. Your body only changes when it's challenged beyond what it's used to doing. That's true at 25, and that's true at 55. The rate of progression changes, the principle doesn't. And your training should move in phases, structured blocks of 4 to 5 weeks, each with a different focus. One phase builds muscular endurance, the next builds raw strength, another focuses on building muscle, and another develops power and explosiveness. Then you cycle back through. Each phase builds on the one before it. And the rotation keeps your body adapting instead of plateauing. This is how smart programming works. It's not random, it's not the same thing every week for a year, it's intentional progression through different demands. And your body responds to that structure in ways it never will to random workouts. If you're training 3 days a week on the strength side, and 3 is a great number, you can do full body sessions each time. You don't need a chest day, you don't need an arm day, you need a program that hits all 6 patterns across the week with enough intensity to drive adaptation and enough rest to recover from it. Next, we have a steady state aerobic training. This is your zone 2 work. It's moderate intensity cardio at a pace where you can hold a conversation, but you'd rather not. A brisk walk with some incline, a bike ride, a rowing machine, a swim, the modality doesn't matter nearly as much as the intensity and the consistency. This is the training that builds your aerobic foundation. It improves your heart's efficiency, it builds capillary density in your muscles so oxygen gets where it needs to go, and it builds mitochondrial density at the cellular level. Those are the engines inside your cells that produce energy. As you age, they decline. Zone 2 training builds more of them and makes the ones you have work a little bit better. 1 to 2 sessions a week, 45 minutes to an hour. Put it on a podcast. It doesn't have to be complicated. Lastly, we have the high-intensity cardio training. This is work that pushes your VO2 max, your body's ceiling for oxygen utilization. And if you're only going to do one type of cardio, I'd argue that this one moves the needle the most for longevity. There's a protocol called the Norwegian 4x4, and it's become the gold standard. It's simple, 4 rounds, 4-minute intervals at a high intensity. We're talking 85 to 95% of your max heart rate. Then 3 to 4 minutes of easy recovery between each round. You can do it on a bike, a treadmill, a rower, whatever gets your heart rate up. The whole session takes about 30 minutes, including a warm-up. Once a week is enough to start driving real improvements in your cardiovascular ceiling. It's not easy, I won't pretend it is, but it's 30 minutes once a week, and the data on what it does for longevity is hard to argue with. Now, a few things to stop doing. Stop training like you're 25. Your body has different requirements now, and ignoring that doesn't make you tough, it makes you injured. If something hurts, that's information. Listen to it. Stop skipping the warm-up. The days of walking in cold and loading a barbell are behind you. Your connective tissue needs time to prepare. Give it 5 to 10 minutes. You'll train better and you'll last longer. Stop doing random workouts. Following a different internet workout every day isn't training, it's exercise roulette. You need a program with structure and progression. Randomness doesn't drive adaptation, consistency does. And stop treating recovery like it's optional. Sleep, nutrition, stress management, those aren't accessories for your training. They're part of the program. Your body doesn't get stronger in the gym, it gets stronger recovering from it. And after 40, that recovery window gets longer and more important. 7 to 8 hours of sleep isn't a luxury, it's a performance requirement. And I want to be clear about something. You're not training to look like you did at 25. That's not the standard anymore. You're training to be capable at 65. You're training to pick up your grandkids without having to think about it, to carry in the groceries in one trip, to get off the floor without help, to hike with your wife, and to be the guy who shows up physically, not just emotionally, for the people who depend on you. That's the standard. Useful, durable, present. Alright, so we've covered the biology, we've covered the training. Now I want to talk about something that might matter more than either one. That's how you think about your body in the second half of life. Because most men are still operating under the framework they built in their 20s. The goal was performance, the metric was aesthetics, you trained to look a certain way, to hit a certain number, and to peak. And that framework worked for a while. But if you carry that same framework into your 40s and 50s, it'll break you. Not physically, mentally. Because you'll be measuring yourself against a version of you that doesn't exist anymore, and you'll always come up short. So the shift is this, from performance to durability, from aesthetics to capability, and from peak to sustained. You're not trying to peak anymore, you're trying to last. Arthur Brooks wrote a book called From Strength to Strength, where he talks about a concept from cognitive science, the shift from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is raw processing power. It's fast, it's sharp, and it peaks early. Crystallized intelligence is wisdom. Pattern recognition, judgment, and the ability to synthesize decades of experience into something useful. It doesn't decline, it deepens. Your body follows that same arc. You're not losing capacity, you're converting it. The raw horsepower of your 20s is being replaced by something more durable, more deliberate, and more tested. You can't move the way you did at 25, but you can move with more purpose, more precision, and more intelligence than you ever did back then. That's not decline, that's maturity. And here's what I've seen after years of training guys through this transition. The men who make this shift don't just train better, they live better. They stop chasing a ghost and start building something real. They stop punishing their body for aging and start partnering with it. And that changes everything. Their energy changes, their confidence changes, their relationship with themselves changes. Your body after 40 isn't a problem to manage, it's a system to optimize, and you have more control over that system than you think. The physical fade is real. Everything we walk through today, the testosterone, the muscle, the metabolism, the cardiovascular decline, it's happening. But here's what makes it different than everything else we've talked about in this series. It's the most reversible of all 4 fades. You can't force friendships overnight, you can't construct your identity in a week, and you can't undo years of emotional silence in a single conversation. But you can walk into a gym tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, and your body will respond. It always does. That's not hype, that's physiology. So we've spent 5 episodes now diagnosing the fade. The physical, the social, the emotional, and the identity. Where it comes from, why it hits men the way it does, and what it costs us when we ignore it. Next week we put it all together with episode 6. What does it actually look like to be a man who refuses to fade? Not in theory, in practice. What's the prescription? What does the life look like? That's the final of this foundation series. And I think it might be the most important conversation we've had yet. My name is Jonathan. This is Against the Fade. Don't fade.